You're going to be Uncle Lee.
Uncle Lee?
Mm-hmm.
Wait, what? Why?
Promise and I are pregnant.
What the heck? Oh shit, dude! I was actually thinking about Promise. I was wondering where the saga left off.
Yeah, dude. We are due in December, maybe January.
So this is recent.
Yeah, yeah, very
Recent news
recent.
already. Wow.
Yes, we found out on Mother's Day.
How secretive. Damn, dude. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Wow. How do you okay, let's just be vulnerable. Let's deep dive into it. How do you feel about this? You can be honest.
Thank you.
And you can stop recording if you also want to be more honest.
Yeah, what I what I feel is an entire range. It is all over the map. Um, the idea of being a father is very easy for me. I wasn't surprised when she told me. I wasn't surprised at all. um, but yet, the reality of shepherding a soul and going through that journey of it's now not just a continuous growth and expansion process for myself, but it's me and the concentric circle of us, right? Promise and I, which is always what comes first. I say source to me, to her, to then our kids, and then to our friends, our family, our teams, our community, the rest of the world. And so it's a ripple effect from there.
Mm.
So it makes it very easy to think that, well, that's constant, whatever source is, right? And
Yes.
then I'm fairly constant. So, so then the next thing is how I show up. So, for example, today doing yoga, we talked about the toroidal field? Is that what you call it?
Mm-hmm.
The energetic fields that it comes up through us through our heart chakra and then goes back down through our feet and comes up and through us. And now we can actually measure these things with instruments, which is crazy. And so I think about that, like we are holistic beings. And so my role as a father, my role as a husband, as a leader, as a shepherd of my own soul and of all the souls that I get to interact with is all encompassing. And so that energy field is actually, it's up there with the most important things that there are, just the energy that I show up with and how I am able to connect and understand and, do the same, obviously, first for myself. So I have energy to give, I have surplus to give. And from there, it ripples to awesome people such as yourself.
Oof. Damn, dude. Wow. Very thoughtful. It's very thoughtful of you. Oh my gosh. There's gonna be a Tyler Jr. maybe. Or a Tylerina.
It's Maverick or it's Tula.
Maverick or Tula. Oh, I
Yep.
love that. Maverick. Whoa.
We're working on middle names and things of that nature. So I threw out the idea of Zen as a middle name, but Mav, Zen, Drake, all single syllables, it's kind of rolls off the tongue very quickly. I like it.
So I'm out of curiosity.
Anything.
Would the child take your last name?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Promise and I are going to get married. I'm designing a ring right now.
Oh, you guys are getting
And
married?
yeah, dude. So what's really crazy about this is entirely in the vortex. When we rewind just over a year ago in April, when you and I were talking on April 1st,
Yes.
and it was about 10 days later that I actually told Promise about that experience that I saw our lives unfolding. I saw our family, I saw our tribe, I saw, this energetic state that I couldn't pinpoint in time, but it felt like a future time. And it was very Lion King-esque. I was here with my staff right down, like holding the staff, like, like Mufasa when he's holding up Simba. And, it felt very much like that. We actually watched Lion King not too long ago, and I mean, dude, I was crying like a little baby, like a little freaking baby.
Wow.
That was like kind of at the core of it. And so what's really amazing here is that we predefined that we were going to spend the first year really diving deep with each other, right? And so we were going to travel, we were going to, do our different growth experiences, we were going to hang out with friends and all this awesome stuff. We were going to move to Tahoe, and literally all that came true, and we got pregnant plus or minus a week of that exact date.
Wow. Powerful intentioning there.
Yeah, dude, what is your take on all this? Like it is unfolding, exactly by intention, but again, the humaning experience here is like sometimes it doesn't unfold the way that I want, or
For
something,
sure.
you know what
For
I
sure.
mean? Like the vortex was so strong, it was so powerful that this was inevitable and it was going to happen. What's your take around all that?
Well, just to follow up on our previous line of questioning, there was an episode not too long ago where things were on the edge of not going forward with promise. I remember you guys spent some time apart. Was that post-pregnancy before she found out, or was that before she found out?
Yeah, that gap is, it's when we really started this podcast, right? This series, and diving in and just hanging out with each other more frequently. Um, I had separated into a different property, and we both did just a ton of introspection, a ton, and ultimately, came back together. And that's what I mean about like everything happens the way that it's supposed to, right? In hindsight, we always look back. I always look back. We use I statements here. I always look back and I'm like, that makes perfect sense. Of course, that's how it happened, right? Even though when we're experiencing something, it might feel like the contrast in the moment, you know, um, we've gone through a lot together. We've gone through a lot together, and it's been amazing. I mean, the way I defined it was felt like a decade in that first year. And so, yeah, I mean, of course, there's areas where there were different, trajectories, but the vast majority was overlapped in alignment. And so, when we focus on the areas where it's, going different directions, sometimes it's just language, and it truly is alignment, but there's just, disconnects in how that gets conveyed or presented. And other times there's, philosophical or principle difference. And so I feel like it's, at least for us, it's been more about languaging or style, but the values are in alignment completely. And because of that, it allows everything else to unfold, even though we have a lot of intensity. We're very intense people, and have a strong pull. So it's been a fascinating experience to go through the emotions of what it's like to know that it's beyond us. Like this is truly magical, to think that a soul chooses its incarnation.
Yeah,
And I believe that. And so
definitely.
Mav, I'm pretty convinced it's Mav. I think it's like over 90%, odds, but it could be two, it could be both. Maybe we got twins. But either way, I'm convinced that, this soul said, oh, I get it. Y'all laid the foundation that you need now. Right. So it doesn't mean that things are perfect, quote unquote. What is perfect except something that can't improve? And so nothing is perfect through that lens, at least. And I believe that, we choose to be in relationship. We choose to be loving. We choose to be supportive. We choose our emotional states. We choose how we want to be. And then also we have our default modes. We have our hardwired and even genetic blueprints around, what we're predisposed to, what our parents did growing up, what were their
Yes.
styles. And so I mean, I feel incredibly blessed. I feel incredibly grateful. We're going to take a road trip here, actually, just a couple days. So we're going to be up in Portland. We'll be able to hang out with you and Mikkel.
Yeah, I really got to meet Promise this time.
Oh yeah, dude. We'll be there for like a week, and we're taking my rig. I got a little like trailer. It's an off-road trailer. Just hooks up to the back, and so we already took it out. Went to the edges of Yosemite 2 days ago, and I mean it was crazy, man. Posted up on a beach, and I mean it felt like a gale force winds. I mean it was probably only like 50 miles an hour, but it felt like 80, and the whole thing was going like. I was like, when's it gonna lift? So at like 3:30 in the morning, we decided, okay, we've both got maybe 15 or 20 minutes of total sleep over the course of 4 hours of attempting. And so we just threw in the chairs, made sure that all the camp stuff was, set up, like the stove was packed up and, things weren't going to fall around, and then just drive. And so we drove to Mono Lake, and this lake has 3 times the density of salt as the ocean.
Wow, so you can like just float easily.
Right, I would think so. The Dead Sea is like 30 times apparently, I think, or no, it wasn't 10 times, but it's significantly more salinity. So I imagine you could, but it's this really interesting environment where it's kind of like in Yellowstone around geysers. There's a lot of like orange algae and different, textures, and like there's literally salt, like it's all over the rocks. And they're saying that it's one of the most thriving habitats in the world. And I was looking around like, there's not a ton of animals here, right? But I imagine that, like Promise is talking about birds and their salt licking. And so there's migratory patterns, I imagine, that come through, and, and it supports the life or bone density or biodiversity of so many other creatures.
It's a trippy place. Interesting. Yeah, please give me a heads up on when you guys will be in town, and we'll plan a date.
Oh yeah, yeah. So it'll be we'll be leaving Thursday or Friday.
Okay, good deal.
So
Be
yeah,
here over the weekend.
be over the weekend and then probably through like Thursday. So it'll be a solid chunk.
Well, we should give Grayson a heads up, and maybe we can do the next episode in person all together.
That sounds awesome.
That'd be fun.
Yeah, I would love to.
Hell yeah, dude. Wow. What a trip, man. Woo. I just remember when our paths first crossed, you were just in the early stages of this unfolding. And then we've just, touched base here and there, and then boom, you're a family man. Woo, Papa Drake.
Isn't it a trip? Like
It is.
the idea of being a dad is really simple in understanding, but is vast and deep in emotion.
Oh, yes. Your whole life's going to change the moment you hold that child physically for the first time.
Yeah.
All right, I got it. So you know what? I know what the theme of this discussion is going to be. It's going to be about family. It's going to be about children. It's going to be about the future. If you're okay with that, I'm just going to ask you some questions. You've always been the questioner, but I think this time I'm going to question you, and then just answer. Just answer to whatever comes to your heart. So,
thank you.
How does Promise feel about all of this?
Elated, ecstatic.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, like
Aww.
this is amazing. So we feel very, very blessed.
So I loved how you had brought up earlier about how beyond our own choices of what emotional state we want to be in, we also have biological impetuses that sort of pop in subconsciously, such as the things that tied from our nurture and nature when we were children. So I have to ask you, how's your relationship been with your parents?
Yeah, great question. Wow. So my parents got divorced when I was 6. I'm the last of 4. And so my oldest brother's 7 years older than me, and then 5 years, and then 3 years for my sister. And so I was really young at that point. I have some memories, but I don't have a lot of conscious memories. And so I was primarily raised by my mom. And my dad is an engineer. He's a civil engineer,
Oh,
and
wow.
my mom is a cheerleader. And so I'm the product of an engineer and a cheerleader. That was the genius of my brother Kevin. I don't know, 7, 8 years ago, he said that. I was like, oh, it makes so much sense, right? Being able to get analytical and technical, but not being driven by that, being driven by the emotion and really wanting to connect and understand. So uh, I went to counseling and stuff a lot as a kid and was
Can I ask
diagnosed with
why?
ADHD.
Okay.
Well, I mean, parents go through divorce, and I didn't feel remorse. I didn't feel bad. I didn't feel like there wasn't guilt. There wasn't, I felt like the counselors actually wanted me to feel that. Like they kept asking things and like pinpointing things and, well,
Mm.
you'll experience, this or something like that. And I was like, no, no, no. I like at this point I was probably in middle school, and I was like, I have two families now. I have a stepmom who's absolutely awesome, and a soon-to-be stepdad at that point. It's absolutely awesome, and they all operate in different quadrants, right? So I got a lot of like kind of that tough love and discipline from my stepmom. She was an ER nurse for 40 plus years. And so she's like, oh, you cut yourself? Are you going to die? No? Okay, you're good. And then my stepdad, like he's all about hunting and fishing and the outdoors, and he's just like a man's man in that regard, and he's the glue, the hub and spoke between so many of his friends and keeping all those communities together. And so yeah, the way that I look at parenting and the way that um, I was raised with a bias towards unconditional love. And so my mom, she already had three other kids. And, the first two were kind of, they pushed the bounds a lot more than my sister. My sister was fairly easy to raise, quote unquote. And so by the time I, started getting to my shit, because I mean, I was a fairly rebellious individual. Um, you know, Mom always said I marched to my own drum,
Say what?
and I marched to my own drum.
Oh, yeah.
And so she would, I wouldn't go to school because, well, I just didn't want to, or I didn't do my homework because, well, I didn't want to, or I'd, take my BB gun and would shoot things that I probably shouldn't, or, whatever. And roll apples under cars as they would drive by because it was hilarious and awesome. And, you know, so I had kind of a loose dynamic with my mom. She was always working multiple roles. She's been selling Mary Kay and like some of these other like multi-level kind of things. She's done a couple of those. We've done some together back in the day, and she'd usually have two jobs at the same time. And so she was one of those people that's incredibly high energy and would be like constantly being busy and moving and like checking things off lists, and like would fall asleep at 2:30 in the morning like this with her head on the couch, going through mail. And so I was like,
Wow.
I don't want to be that, right? I don't want to be constantly
Interesting.
going. And so I think I became more introspective. And my dad's very detached. He's loving, but he is an engineer. Things are very black and white. There's not a lot of neutral mind. Actually, I take that back. He actually has a large neutral mind. There's one thing in yoga today we were focusing on. We have the positive mind, we have the negative mind, and the neutral mind. And the framing that was used, feel free and chime in and add anything if you'd like, or just share your perspective. But the positive mind is like, yes, I can do it, right? And so a lot of like the Tony Robbins kind of energy, right? Like, I can, like, I want to, I'm here, yes, go, right? Versus the negative mind, like, oh no, I can't, I'm stressed, anxiety, it's pressure, right? And the neutral mind's like, just is, I'm here, I'm present. They all have their different uses, but now that I think about it through that lens, I think my dad actually exhibits a lot of that neutral mind.
Interesting. That was some really good answering, my friend. Lots of detail. You've definitely thought a lot about this. And would
Thank
you
you.
spend, so did you primarily live with your mom and then would visit your biological dad at times? Or was
Yeah,
it sort of, okay.
I didn't ever live with them. At one point, I almost did in high school when I wasn't doing so well by grade standards. And so I decided not to. They gave me the choice, but I did volunteer in the ER. I call it forced volunteerism because it was my grades that landed me there. But spent a year just helping out in the ER at Meridian Park Hospital up in Tualatin, and it was where my stepmom worked, and it was fascinating. Like it was a humbling experience. Met some really cool people there. There was this guy Rob that I haven't talked to in 20 years or something, but he still like asks about me and stuff to Linda whenever she sees him, and we would talk about like at that point I was deep into uh, sustainable energy and alternative fuels and different kind of creative concepts. And so one of the things we talked about is creating a giant solenoid, putting like large amounts of trash inside a capsule and then blasting it off to another planet or star, to actually remove the trash from the planet.
Whoa, interesting. Dang, man. So one thing I liked about your description is that you were pointing out directed things about your parents that you liked and you wanted to integrate, and then things you learned indirectly, things that you witnessed and saw them do where you're like, oh, I don't want that for myself. Like your mom staying super busy. You're able to see and feel what that was like for her and then decide at an early age, okay, this isn't going to be my path. Seeing and feeling how your father, who's an engineer, chose to view things in a very neutral mind, which, although very neutral, is still a positive asset because it gives you more choice, gives you more awareness. So you've been able to extract those perspectives and those directions through life at a very early age. That's awesome, man.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What about you?
What about
Do,
me?
do, would you like to share any of your story?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I learned a lot from my father indirectly. Um, I don't know much about my birth mom. I don't have many memories of her. She passed away when I was really young, when I was 4.
Mm.
But I think my father had a really hard time dealing with reality, and he was a creative type. And I think he would constantly live in this bizarre world that he made for himself, that he convinced himself that things were okay in. And he also had a really hard time keeping his word on things, and he was very self-sabotaging. All of things of which I'd actually recognized in myself over time. And I saw how I was, in a lot of senses, unconsciously repeating some of his energy dynamics for myself. I pushed myself really hard in school because it's what my mother would have wanted. And it was something that my father didn't pursue. So in a way, it was kind of anger driven.
Mm.
At first, I was so driven to succeed because I didn't want to be like him at all. I didn't want to live the life that he picked for himself. He chose fear a lot of the time. Given many different instances, there were many, many turning points in his life, chances where he could have pulled out, chances where he could have succeeded, and he buckled every time. And it's been kind of
Every
this,
time.
yeah, just about, yeah, numerous times where he was an entrepreneur himself, business minded. He was a successful business owner when my mom was alive, and things were going well, but I don't think he recovered from the emotional trauma when she died. And there were
Mm.
also some negative dynamics between him and my grandma, his birth mom, that he never grew past. I see echoes of trauma. You know, there was a chance that he could have been abused himself when he was young. His parents divorced when he was, I think, in middle school, roughly. and he did not have the best childhood himself. And there are articles in psychology that talk about how some people's emotional and psychological development can get stunted based off of trauma early on, and they might retain that emotional range or that level of psychological maturity if they're not able to find recourse or healing internally. And that
Mm.
continues up until they're all the way throughout their adult life. And I see how in a lot of ways he's still emotionally stuck as a teenager in some ways. So yeah, as I grow older, I try to put myself in his position. I would have been 6 years old. So I'm 30 now, and by the time he was 30, he would have had a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old on his hands as a widow, and that's pretty intense.
Mm.
I think to myself, could I have been stable enough to raise my kids and found a way? Hindsight's 2020. I like to think that I would have done whatever it took. Um, he has always had a history of not picking his kids and picking, two different stepmoms and their wills and their desires. He always picked that over over myself and my sister every time, kind of throwing us under the bus. So I can't say if it's wrong or right. It was maybe just his way of surviving. By picking his spouse, it served himself, and it gave him enough motivation or will to continue on, to continue living, maybe something. Yeah, so I'm not gonna lie, dude. It's affected me on a level to where I don't want kids. I'm not saying I wouldn't. I think I would be a good parent if the opportunity did just fell on my lap. Consciously, I'm not aiming for children myself, but I think about myself as a family person, as a father to kids, and although I think I could be a good one, it's inspired me to not take that path for now. For now, I feel like I can contribute a lot in other ways. Seth actually talks about this, and it's been on my mind for pretty much the past 10 years since I read it. He talked about how children come in many forms, and not just physically. As you might know, there are other realities where you have kids and you don't, and they all exist. They all exist with the same validity. And in some realities where you don't have physical kids, your children come through the form of creation, of art, or of discovery, or of an invention. Your life's work can become your child or your children. And listening to my heart and listening to my soul intently, I feel as though that's something I actually would rather pursue, that my children be not actual physical kids, but be my work, my life's work, whatever that may be.
Mm.
And there are other realities where I actually have kids. This is going to sound strange, but anytime I fly in an airplane, something about the altitude puts me in this deep meditative state. And I'll have like really strange and powerful emotional experiences on airplanes. Like I'll just be looking out the window and just like letting my mind drift. And then sometimes I can connect to these different thoughts or these different inspirations. And there was one time I was flying back home from a job, and all of a sudden I had these deep, painful pangs in my chest of missing my family.
Mm.
Like I was missing a wife and a child, like a toddler. Like in the emotional part of it was that my family existed, and I missed them greatly. But I knew, obviously, I wasn't married. I didn't have a kid. It was a strange moment where I connected to a parallel reality self where I was already married and had a kid. Yeah,
Mm.
kind of weird, but
Do you feel like that was triggered because you're in proximity to so many families, or do you think that maybe it had to do with your state of? I noticed that I have a different style of thinking on planes.
yeah,
I haven't drilled into that, but I just every time I'm like, wow, I do my best thinking up here, and
yeah, really, it's strange. I think where you are at in terms of height from the sea, I think it can affect your brain waves, honestly. we are, I'm trying to remember the exact terminology, but the Earth itself does emit frequencies. I'll even just try to find it right now and see if I can pull it up.
There we go. Get our data-driven approach to reincarnational beingness and families. And how did that feel for you to be missing your toddler and your wife in that instance?
It was crazy. It was I mean, like the emotion is what makes it feel so real, you know. Or I was able to find it, so I'll share my browser.
7.83 hertz.
The Earth behaves like a gigantic electric circuit, and its electromagnetic field surrounds and protects all living things with a natural frequency pulsation of 7.83 hertz. Now, we had talked earlier about brainwaves, or the frequency of brainwaves.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see, I still have that picture as well. Are you still seeing the web browser?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think I have to switch to this picture now. So this picture that I showed previously, the
Yes.
different brainwave states, the alpha theta range, where see creativity, insight. So 7.87, it's closer to theta, around alpha. I think for some reason, being further up in the atmosphere, it can affect your brainwave frequency. And
Do you think it goes lower or higher?
it might go higher. If I remember I saw this once before. Yeah. The further away from the Earth that you go, the higher the frequency range. So up where airplanes would be is actually more towards like 40 to 50 plus hertz.
Do you know if the frequency emanates from the center, from the core, and
It
goes
does.
out?
Yeah, Earth is a giant electromagnetic battery, essentially. Um, Radiation. No, okay. I may not be able to find it. People are gonna just take my word for it, but yeah, it's a trip. I think the altitude affects it. There was another interesting study I read. Oh, that makes you disappear completely. Well, let's see if I can turn it. I put it to full screen. Okay, I can do full screen. Otherwise, I disappear. um, Another interesting study I read was the effects of psychology based off of your location, based off of the height of the sea level that you were at. So if you were in somewhere in Utah or Colorado, which is like more than a mile above sea level, your emotional and mental disposition could be different as opposed to if you were in the sea. And why they found this to be
Hmm.
the case, this is actually a study that was run out of Utah, specifically the Mormon Missionary Training Center. So the
Hmm.
Mormon Missionary Training Center in Provo, Utah, it's high enough in elevation, and it's a spot where people from all over the world come to train to be missionaries and then get sent out from after their training to other parts of the world. So you had people from all over the world there, and they had found that people that stayed there long term would sometimes, or people that moved to Utah would sometimes feel the need to go on an antidepressant or anti-anxiety medication, while others that
Really?
moved, yeah, while others that moved here did not. And when they did studies, they saw that the way that your brain chemistry produces certain neurotransmitters does become affected based off your elevation.
In a, I mean, if we were to say positive or negative, that would actually be in a negative manner for
Could
feel
be,
good, like
yeah.
serotonin or dopamine.
Some people would move out here in this high elevation and thrive. Some people would actually ditch their psych meds, while others would have to get on them.
So
The,
it wasn't conclusive one way or the other based on
yeah,
elevation.
it wasn't conclusive that moving to a high elevation was bad, but they did say that it was somewhat conclusive that depending on just how you're made, I don't know if it's obviously genetic to some degree, or it could be based off of nurture, like how much time you spent in a certain elevation. Human biology does change. This is kind of a big tangent, but human biology does change a bit based on elevation. For instance, the Nepalese people, the ones that are like the mountains in Nepal are very high elevation. There are
Right.
some indigenous people out there that are known for being short and stout, barrel chested. They have a broader chest than the average human being because they need a bigger lung capacity since oxygen is thinner up there.
Hmm.
So, small examples of how evolution adapts to your elevation. It could be more than just lung capacity and lung size, though. It could be your brain chemistry as well. You obviously need oxygen and other, and nitrogen, other types of gases in order for your body to just do its thing for you to survive. So depending on how abundant maybe oxygen or nitrogen or other necessary gases are based off that elevation, your genetics could play a part. I'm part Korean, and I have a lot of Scottish and other European blood in me, and most of that DNA lineage is more closer to the coast, more closer to the sea level. And I honestly noticed quite a shift in my behavior when I lived in Utah compared to being in Portland, which is closer to sea level.
And then what
I was,
elevation were you at in Utah?
let's see. I'm actually curious. Let's see.
It's
Utah.
like in Tahoe, I mean, I'm at 6,500 feet right now, 6,700 feet right now. It's 62.
Utah, average of Utah is 6,100 feet, and it fluctuates because most of the cities are by mountains.
Hmm.
Most of those mountains are pretty damn tall. So that's
Where did
more
you
than a
live?
mile. Huh?
Where did you live? Which city?
Predominantly Utah Valley.
Okay. Don't know where that is.
Yeah, so Utah Valley is right in the middle of Utah, and it's right next to like a pretty big mountain range. So the highest point in Utah is Kings Peak, which is 13.5 thousand feet above sea level. So it can
That's
get
a
pretty damn
peak.
high. Yeah. So
Wow.
yeah, I honestly moving to Portland and being around this oxygen-rich forest as well as being closer to the sea level, I think
Hmm.
has made my overall disposition better. I feel a lot better living in Portland than I did in Utah. So, yeah,
Really?
yeah,
Even with the distinctions in sun?
yeah. I mean, oddly enough, I actually like overcast. Yeah, I like the gray skies.
Fits you well
It's
then.
yeah, it's weird.
Why do you like
Um,
the gray skies?
it's oddly comforting to me. It makes reality seem like whenever I see like a big gray sky where everything's illuminated, but there's no direct point where the sun is, it kind of gives the daylight time a bit of this surreal vibe. And I've always enjoyed things that are surreal.
Hmm.
In a way, it makes me present in a different way.
How do you define surreal?
Surreal is something. It's like this thing that you can't quite pinpoint that doesn't make it seem real. I guess it's like, that's a good question. I don't know if I have a definitive answer for that. Surreal is anything that seems a little bit more than real. Something's a little bit off. There's a little bit of a WTF element, a WTF
So
vibe.
isn't this what you talk about in your dreamscape and astral projection and the
Yeah,
lucid dreaming and the idea of daydreaming when you were having that epiphany, you were on a plane, you were looking out the window, your mind was allowed to just be free and going out there. And so could it be that surreal, as you defined it, is actually what you gravitate towards?
yeah, well said, for sure. I mean, Portland, the land of portals. This place is Portland's a trip, man. There's a strange energy about it, and I think I was drawn to it, honestly, like a magnet.
What actually got you to move?
Ultimately, it was a work opportunity,
Mm.
but the work opportunity I think was just a synchronicity that the universe provided so that the ego level would be okay with physically moving there. Look, like you said, looking back, you can see how everything makes sense. Well, I don't think I would have made near as much personal development and evolution if I didn't move here. I would have been very stagnant in Utah. That's what I was suffering from. Even though my closest friends and my family were in Utah, and I pretty much spent most of my life there, there's a lot of familiarity. I was I was dying on the soul level.
Mm.
Things became so
Whoa.
repetitive. Things became so boxed in. There didn't seem like any possibility to break out. There didn't seem like any possibility to change. I felt on a deeper energetic level that if I wouldn't have made any changes, I couldn't have changed myself. I kept getting impulses that I needed to get out. Otherwise, I would have been a lot more unconscious, for sure.
Wow.
Yeah, coming here, although it was tough and scary moving out here by myself to
Hmm.
Portland, um, I took the necessary actions. I tuned into the universe in terms of like signs, synchronicities, everything had constant validation.
Mm.
And looking back on my life in the past 2 years, it the best way I can explain it is like coming home. There's a deeper familiarity that I'm able to pick up on. People that I met that are like my tribe, like I've made friends here that I feel so close to in a short amount of time. This deeper
Mm.
sense that I've known them before, as weird as it is. That first night I did the medicine ceremony in that little Portland basement house, I had just this beautiful warmth of familiarity, of just like remembering that I'm home and I know these people, like just this deep sense of love. It's yeah, it was a different strain of love I hadn't tasted before.
Talk about that.
Yeah, my discovery to love. This honestly, the past 2 years has been a discovery of what love is.
Mm.
I had never experienced like I to kind of be a bit of a juxtaposition to your upbringing. I didn't really experience unconditional love. Most of my
Highly
love was,
conditional.
yeah, mine was very conditional. Specifically through my stepmoms. Both my stepmoms were very uh, off emotionally and mentally. I want to. It's probably just due to their own childhood trauma. They were very off mentally and emotionally,
Mm.
and psychologically and emotionally abusive. But they would give me positive emotions if I had strictly upheld their expectations of me. And the same would go with my father. My father would only interact with me if there was something that he could get, whether it was advice
Oh.
or someone to talk to or someone to help him with his business endeavors. I went into credit card debt for him. So it was I'm wanted if there was a need. So I was
Mm.
wanted if there was a need from my father, and I was given positive energy if I behaved or performed a certain way. And that was most of
Mm.
my growing up experience. And that was very hardwired. Even meeting new people, it was so conditioned that I thought to myself, I have to prove myself as someone that is worth their attention. So I have to be valuable. And I also have to adjust my behavior and how I approach this person based off of what makes them comfortable. And that was my approach. And then meeting my tribe here in Portland, I was presented with many opportunities where that kind of fell on its face. And
Mm.
I was given love in an unconditional sense, like given so freely, and it really put me off guard. It threw me for a loop. It
What do they
was
want?
yeah,
Why would someone do that?
no there yeah my first yeah for a long time my thought process was why is this person so warm with me from the get-go? Why is this
Mm.
person so giving and so trusting of me from the very beginning? And in my mind, I
Wow.
wanted to justify that they saw something in me that I didn't. So I kept taking it as an opportunity. I was so desiring to be in a different place in my life that anytime I had a new stranger here be so warm and open from the beginning, I wanted to prove that reflection of me as valid. In a lot of cases, Tyler, I stepped up to become the person that people saw in me. So it was a chance it was
You stepped
reinventing it,
up. Could you repeat that? You stepped up to be
the person that they saw in me that I didn't see in myself at the time.
positive mind, negative mind, neutral mind. What framing are you speaking through?
It was a mix of the positive and the negative, definitely.
So like they're seeing into your trusting, your intrinsic value, your soul, who you are, like just loving you for you when
Yeah,
maybe you didn't have permission as, when you were growing up, you didn't have that permission slip to just be loved for whatever. It's like, no, you're loved
yeah,
because.
Yes, and instead of accepting their energy at face value, there was a negative judgment upon myself of, well, they don't really know who I am, like, or am I really deserving of this? You know, or is what they see me really who I am? So presented it presented in a way for me an identity crisis in a good way. I wanted change very badly, and I wanted to change myself when I made the decision to move. I wanted to reinvent myself. It's a very cliche trope of going somewhere new, reinvent yourself. So who I had envisioned to be, who I had wanted to be coming out here, the universe presented opportunities where I could validate for myself if that was really who I was.
Mhm.
There were moments, there were certain events and moments where I was presented a choice where my consciousness amplified. And when I had this gut feeling of, Lee, this choice that you're about to take is very important. It's going to be a character defining choice. So
Mhm.
think deeply about what your next steps are going to be. And yeah, it's been the past 2 years has been a redefining of who I am, really, based off of my choices, like by making conscious choices. And then, and based off of those choices and the feelings that I got from those choices, I've been able to revise who I really am, tell my story in a different way. And it's been reinforced over time. It's allowed me to step into this new self. You know, we are all mirrors of each other, right? We all offer reflections. Very early on, I learned that I had a gift. And that gift is when I meet somebody new, for some reason, I can just see the best of them. I can just see like all I see is just the positive aspect of them and what they could be, what they really are, whatever. And there's this intense energy of non-judgment. I I am very understanding of people after based off of all the shit that I went through. So I would have people let down their walls around me and become very vulnerable. And then I learned very early on that vulnerability was a key to deeper connection. And what I had
Mm.
struggled to do for myself is to, although I could allow other people that space to be very vulnerable and to connect with me and trust me on that level, I had a hard time doing the opposite. I had a very hard time being trusting and vulnerable myself with my own core feelings and selfhood and my emotional states. So it's been a lot of learning to just let go, you know, cliches that is as well. And yeah,
It sounds as though the contrasts, right? If we look at, you know, the way that you were raised, the construct of how love gets shown and the dynamics of relationship gave you real clarity that, oh, it feels super good to not be judged. So I'm just gonna not judge people and see what happens. And it's elegant blaming is what Tony calls it. Tony Robbins calls it elegant blaming, and it's one of my favorite concepts. Abraham talks about it as the contrast. You know,
yes, yes.
we all go through the contrast, but it's ultimately a gift when we find a meaning. And so, that's what learning is, right? Is finding a new meaning through our experiences. And what you just coined so well is, the challenges that you had growing up. It was actually, every story is two stories. It's either something that you want to learn from and model and emulate, or something you want to do the exact opposite or like run away from, right? So I feel like a lot of that away energy that you had growing up and all the way that it shaped your soul and gave you the ability to like kind of hone in on what your signature frequency is, and then
Amen.
allow that to amplify. So when you see somebody else, you're actually listening for their signature frequency. And that's why you're hearing or seeing or experiencing the best part of them, because you're looking for that purity. And then you add the instruments to it. Go back episode 1 if you don't know what we're talking about here. And it's fantastic, man. It's an incredible. Well, first off, does that resonate?
100%, yes. 100%. And something I'd learned earlier that I've been able to experience myself, through these new relationships is the power of being an active mirror, a conscious mirror. If we approach each other as strangers, let's say I never knew you, but let's say we're sitting on we're in a forced position. Let's say we both got a single ticket on an airplane and we found out we sat next to each other. It's going to be a
That'd be
long
an
flight.
awesome ride.
Indeed. Yeah, in this example, if we didn't know each other, but we sat next to each other and we're both in a receptive state, we're both feeling talkative, I can look over to you, I can smile, I can see what you have. Maybe you have an interesting journal you pulled out. Maybe you're wearing some interesting jewelry. You're like, I'm really drinking in how you're presenting yourself, and I'm noticing just the micro movements of your face. And I think to myself, this person's very fascinating. And I approach you with that energy of like, I don't know who you are, stranger, but you got a story to tell. Da 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 da.
Yes.
Just that vibe sets the stage of, oh, this person's putting out this energy where I can step into. And then it's like this very conscious exchange of how much energy you are willing to reveal. Where, and
Hmm.
and and this amount of revealing solidifies your perceptions of yourself and your perceptions in each other. So you could easily turn around and be like, you know what? Yeah, I don't want to talk. Put on your headphones, and then you, in that moment, would choose, I'm going to put on the energy of the standoffish, like don't talk to me, fuck off vibe. And then I would then, like, you would solidify that about you, I would solidify that about myself, and we reinforce an idea of who you are.
Mm.
But if you engage with maybe another warm energy, if you pick up on that energy and you engage, and we constantly are intentionally and genuinely listening to each other, right? Giving each other that stage to where we can kind of express ourselves. Maybe you express a bit of pride in who you are because of the work that you've done, and then I can then take a turn, really giving that expression of pride a platform, giving it validity, giving an honest engagement of, wow, like you have fucking come a long way, you're a fascinating person. You leave that plane with another reflection of, shit, maybe I am a really fascinating person, and maybe you didn't have that thought about yourself before, vice versa as well. Yeah, so I've always tried to give people, in the previous podcast, we talked about how we're always projecting out what we want to receive to some degree. I was constantly wanting to give others help because really I needed some help, you know?
Yes.
And then the ability to not just ask, but receive that help as well, like really like intentionally receiving that help, um, putting out my best foot, and then having others show me through their responses and through the reception of, Lee, this is what I see you as. And me thinking to myself, is that who I really am? Maybe not right now, but it's who I want to be. So
Mm.
in the present, I can make the choice of being that person. And even if I'm not convinced right now, if I do it enough, I will be convinced. That's kind of
Mm.
the approach I took, is just, yeah,
When did
taking
you
take
begin that? How old were you when you consciously, because you just said very succinctly that energy exchange, and that's rapport, right? Trust plus comfort. It's rapport. And so what you're doing is by my interpretation is you've studied how to create trust and comfort and then accelerated it by finding what is it that I want to focus on in this person's consciousness that I believe may be undervalued, that I see clearly that is a huge point of value. And that's the platform you described. And then it just raises vibrations. It feels good. Like,
Yes,
because there's, our probability cone, and we all fit inside of these different probabilities. And so your impact has a direct relationship to what probability that somebody goes. Are they going more
could
towards the
be.
negative mind, more towards the positive mind, more towards the
Yeah,
neutral mind? Are they being expansive and creative, or are they being smaller? Are they being, because judgment shrinks, right? It says you must fit into my blueprint. But this expansive platform, and when did this start to crystallize for you?
I guess there was a moment when I was sort of on my own, 18 or 19, and I had accepted what the world told me, that I was an adult. There was a moment where I had to decide for myself, what does an adult mean? And I say that in the sense of, what do I want my future self to be? Like, who do I want to be as a person? I don't remember the psychologist's name, but there's a psychologist who kind of coined this this flow of life where there's these different stages. And it's the ages between 18 and 23, 24, that 5 to 6 year period where most people sort of they ask themselves who they are. They define from that point forward, like what kind of a person they want to be. So it was roughly around that age I started questioning what I wanted to be. And it was in that age range where I knew what I wanted to be, but I didn't know if I believed it. I didn't know if I trusted it. I didn't know what actions I had to take or what I had to do to be perceived. So, and there was an evolution of that. You know, there was just a very base logical level where if I just did A and A plus B, then of course I would get C. But as I matured, I started to understand the emotional part of it too. It had to feel right. It didn't have to just make sense, but it also had to feel right as well. And then being able to tune into both.
Did
So
you which way did you lean most prior to 18 to that 24 range? Did you lean more towards the analytical, or did you
100%.
lean? Okay.
Yeah, I had to be very analytical was the path that I had to take for survival.
Hmm.
Yeah, so the analytical side that allowed me to get to where I was.
Is there a relationship between analytical and survival?
This relationship between analytical and survival. I would think so, definitely, for sure.
Could they be like a similar frequency? Because, analytical could also
Mm,
be, I mean, I guess analytical is it is defining, it's confining, it's constraints, it's getting rid of the fluff versus creativity, expansion, right? Possibility is this like endless nebulous, space.
yeah,
But the analytical is drawing it down. So I wonder, do you think does that feel right? Like there's a relationship to the more
there,
analytical, the
yeah,
lower the
there
energy
is,
state?
and I like how you put it because that's definitely one way that acts out. Being purely analytical can be restrictive for sure, especially in the sense of if you are trying to get to an endpoint. And that's how I did lead my life because I understood pain. I understood pain very well, and I understood that there are ways to achieve that pain. There are ways to avoid that pain. So like any normal person, I would consciously take steps to avoid pain, right?
No.
Um, yeah. Oh, um, I swung like a pendulum. If we were to make that distinction that being very analytical was on the polar opposite spectrum of just being purely feeling, and as you define like unlimited creativity, I did experience pendulum swings of that. There would be moments where I would just throw away my logic and be purely feeling based, but even then I would experience inconsistency,
Hmm.
and I would have to tap into what I felt was I guess my relationship with both have evolved and changed where I do need a harmony of both. We are creatures of emotion, energy in motion, motivation. It's the whole reason why we're alive. But the fact that we are also in a world of limitation, in a world of consequences, being able to use your rationality and your analytical mind can serve a benefit. It's about that harmonization and that integration, utilizing both. When you
Hmm.
are using your analytical mind in harmony with your emotions, then that's when exponential creativity and magic and structure can happen. Before I was experiencing the old trope of the best laid plans, or no, I'm gonna butcher that saying, but it's basically like you can make the grandest plans that you want, but life can always throw a wrench in your way. And I was experiencing that. I would actually have these like long-term schemes and plans, and they would always fall apart. Life
Hmm.
life would just happen. Like I'd thrown a curveball, and that's because in the past I didn't create an analytical pathway from my heart. I was disconnected from how I felt about it.
Whoa.
Yeah.
You didn't create an analytical pathway for your heart.
Yeah, in the sense that I would do something because logically it made sense, like more security, more financial benefit, more safety, getting something I really wanted in the end, even though at present it didn't feel good. Like working, I used to work as a tech installing security systems and camera systems all over the US, made a lot of money. Like analytically, it made sense to me. But in the actual act itself, I despised it.
Hmm.
Something like that. And that's something that everyone does, right? A lot of like 80, what's the statistic? Like 80-ish% of people, at least in America, work some job they don't like. Kind of a depressing reality for some people, right? Because we all have to quote unquote survive. But as I started to just open up myself to more questioning and being honest with myself and realizing, how I spend my life is important, right? How I make my memories is important. Like I don't want to have a whole lifetime of memories where I'm just not happy. I want to feel happy. I want to listen to my heart. But I
Mm.
also am engaged in a very objective, contrast filled reality. I am not purely in a reality of my own because that is what I chose. I chose to be in this reality where I am meant to be interactive. I am meant to be social. I am meant to discover who I am through other people and their reflections. I'm trying to find out who I am, or if not find out, remember who I am.
Mm.
There was this beautiful quote that my friend Rachel, you know her. Oh shoot, I'm gonna
Mhm.
bleep out her name. I'll pull it up and I'll share it. It's very apropos about how spirituality and the subjective reality tie in together. By Nassim Haramein. I don't know who that is. I'll look him up if you'd like, but beautiful quote from him. There is a concept that a person can create their own reality. This concept is only partially correct because it is a generally discussed in a one-way mirror. An example, a person sending a message to the field with a request slash intention slash prayer, desiring an outcome. This is only half of the loop. The wave you're sending is the feed forward part of the loop. You need to realize that the wave coming back is the feedback, which is the rest of the universe creating its reality and responding to you. The
Hmm.
universe, aka the Planck field or the divine, interacts with the rest of humanity and your creation, and the universe gives you a result that is a combination of everyone's feed forward waves. If a person could create a reality exactly the way they wanted, a few things would happen. One, you would be the only one in it because everybody else would be creating their own. And it would be very lonely. Two, you'd also be bored within seconds since you had everything you had wanted. What happens is that you put your intention out into the field and you stay open to what comes back, realizing it's going to get modified for the highest evolution of the whole. This unexpected feedback gives you empathy for yourself and others. You might not get exactly what you expected, but now you're learning from the experience. The totality of everyone's learning is how the universe learns about itself. Really interesting perspective, and it feels right. It feels right because if we were in our own purely created reality, then we'd be living in a constant lucid dream or a constant astral projection on a higher dimension where you got everything that you imagined all the time. And as Abraham Hicks would define, that's not the leading edge. It's not where the unexpected can happen. You know, Bashar has even mentioned that part of what makes this reality so engaging, and Seth has talked about this too, is that there's a slight gambling element to it. There's a
Mm.
slight level of unexpectedness.
Mm.
The energy and the events that you manifest or desire strongly can happen, but the way of which they can, that is the uncontrollable, that is the quote unquote uncontrollable element, the surprise. That's what makes physical reality so spicy. That being said, we have many examples in life of individuals that we resonate towards. For you, easily Tony Robbins. He has created and defined a path for himself that has inspired many others. It's created its own type of energy dynamic, an own philosophy, a way of life, a type of social engineering in a sense, right? You all
Mhm.
have your own culture. Tony Robbins has created his own microculture, a culture being a set of definitions and ways of behavior that everybody is subscribed to because it hits people on different levels, such as it makes sense and it feels good. But
Right.
it's something, he had to forge. He wasn't born with that. He had to build it up.
Totally.
And we see people like that and we're like, oh, we can use our analytical mind to build something for us that feels damn good. Yeah.
Amen.
If someone like Tony Robbins can, against all odds, because like there's so many variables, right? There's so many different ways that his life could have gone, but that's what makes his journey so goddamn exciting and his story so cool. Is because against the odds, against the gamble that is physical reality, that there's a demonstration, there's a lesson to how you can manifest something as big and as powerful as what he's created if you have the right formula. And that, but I'm sure you've learned that formula is not a one size fits all. You have to modify it a bit to fit yourself in some cases. You know, reading the Seth material, listening to Abraham Hicks, listening to Bashar, you are faced with questions still of, is this what I really believe in? Can I believe that this works for me? Because they're all invisible sets of rules, right? There's nothing
Right.
concrete about any of this. You have to do your own sort of scientific method. If I do this, does it work? Do I get the result that I want? You keep doing it until you find that system, right? Until you find
It's
that.
really interesting how you define that. Seth just talked about it in the Nature of Personal Reality. I just finished that book.
Yeah, hell yeah, dude.
Yeah, it took a while.
Thick book.
It is. It is. And they talk about how we have all these different verticals, our science, and we have physicists, and then we have biologists, and then we have like fill in the blank, and they're all looking at things and interpreting through their own lens. But the point that Seth had is it's all there. Everything interrelates with everything else. And so we might have a filter or a lens that we're looking through at that particular, if we're looking at science, for example, that's the ability to have a predictable outcome, right? So we're just defining what already exists, and we create formulas or strategies or structures so that we can then relay that to other people and be like, oh, you always get that outcome. And it's science, it's real. But anything that's real is just, it's a belief system that it's real. And I think you just defined that so well, like again, with Tony, to talk about that, he says there's the science of achievement. It's formulaic, it's mechanical, it's left brain, right? And then there's the art of fulfillment. And the example he always uses is Robin Williams. My goodness, by every standard, I mean, the guy wanted to have the most popular TV show and did it, right? He wanted to win an Academy Award and an Oscar, and he did it. And then he wanted to do it for not being funny, which is the thing he was really good at, and he did it. And all this stuff.
Good Morning Vietnam.
There you go. See, I'm not even I'm not too familiar, but as an example, as an archetype, he touched millions and millions of people, but yet he wasn't feeling something in here. He wasn't giving to himself. Maybe that was the thing. Maybe he was so challenged by like how you were describing how you grew up and like the conditional love element. Well, maybe he wanted to laugh so much and it was never satiated inside of him, but he was able to do it for other people. Like that might have been why he had that drive and that spark and that desire. But to not feel fulfillment from it, to not live long and prosper, right? It's not just live long. Living long sucks if you're not prospering, if you're not enjoying it. Like, no one wants to do that, right? Like, there's such creativity in this life that we get to live, and yet there's such contrast. That's why there's creativity. Like, we have to know what we don't want to know what we do want.
Value fulfillment. That's a thing that Seth talks about over and over again. Honestly, as the raison d'etre, the reason to live is value fulfillment. I think that's kind of cool. I didn't know much about Tony Robbins' philosophy, but hearing about how there's the art of fulfillment, yes. Fulfillment it's an emotion.
Yes.
And it's a very complex and abstract emotion. But the feeling of it is when you achieve a level of fulfillment that's based purely out of integrity, right? Because you have to give your permission to feel fulfilled whatever endeavor you're taking upon. It's it's incredible. It's a type of peace and connectedness that can't be achieved without some level of work, without some level of engagement. And that plateau, that level does differ from person to person. It's just as unique as our DNA. Some people can become very fulfilled living a very simple life, being a shoe cobbler and raising a family and doing a damn good job at both can be very fulfilling. While others, such as Robin Williams, has to just express himself on every platform possible to show himself that he is what he thought he would be, what he felt he should be, this beloved entertainer and this very hilarious soul, a light in the world.
Then why would he take his life?
Well, because
Obviously, this is your perspective.
we don't know him directly, so we can't give a definitive answer. When that first happened, I had read that he was facing a lot of issues, both in his health. His health was degrading at a pretty rapid rate. I think he was starting to develop the same thing that Michael J. Fox had. What's that? What is that?
Is that Parkinson's?
Parkinson's, yeah. Like he was losing the ability to control his limbs a little bit.
Mm.
And he was also facing some pretty bad debt, and he was not getting the same roles. So his quality of life had fallen down. This is gonna be a little tinfoil hatty. I'm not saying this is why he died, but there's this thing about celebrities that have died in the manner that he did, which is hanging from a doorknob. If you, I had heard from different sources, the validity of which I don't know if this is true or not, but famous people of renown that die through hanging themselves off the doorknob, it's a symbolic thing, basically saying that this person has betrayed an organization. Yeah, so like the cabal, we talked in depth about if there was a cabal or if there was a dark side to the entertainment industry or Hollywood. It is said that Hollywood is very deeply tied to the CIA and the Pentagon and the government and all that jazz. And that's going to be another episode, the layers of what that might be. But some say that he was suicided. It's a colloquial term. Yeah, suicided. Someone that's been killed but made to look like a suicide. There are people that think that he could have been suicided because he was about to give out some insider information. Yeah, but good question. Why did he kill himself if he did? We won't know for sure because we don't know him, don't know his family.
And to a large degree, it's like, does it matter? Does it actually matter? Because if we all have our own journey and our own blueprints, we can look for the formulas, we can look for the reflections of what we see in ourselves, but his own motivations are his own motivations.
Yeah. And even Seth says that we all choose our death one way or another. Seth does make mention that every death is a suicide, whether it appears natural or not.
Whoa. Okay, interesting. If that's the case, then how much of our unconscious thoughts are running that show?
I think the unconscious thoughts do interact with the higher self, the point of you that is the unconscious creator, the feedback of the reality generation. I think for some people, if their emotions are strong enough, if their thoughts are strong enough, can manifest their own means to an end. If people want to kill themselves, they'll kill themselves one way or another. And there have been instances, and even Seth gives this example too, of somebody who wants to die really bad but doesn't have the courage to do a physical act, might die in an accident. A guy walking home from work can have something fall on his head from an apartment several stories above, like maybe the AC unit falls out and crushes him. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm on the magical approach now. So the way it works is Audible only has 3 of Jane's books. So it has Seth Speaks, it has The Nature of Personal Reality, and then they go from 1973 to 1980. And the magical approach is the one that I'm on. So the other 2 are 22-hour books. You know, a lot of it's that core material. And, you know, what happens in between is Jane passes.
Yeah.
So Robert at the beginning is like, I get everything through Seth's perspective, that we're living in this multi-dimensional reality that exists simultaneously, and that we're all just extensions of that larger soul. And so going in and out of these physical vessels, not a big deal. Um, but he was still crying every day for
Yeah.
over a year. Like, so did Jane choose that? Does the person at 7 years old that, passes, do they choose that?
They do,
Is like,
of course. Yeah. Jane knew that her lifestyle choices, such as smoking and drinking all the time, would deteriorate her quality of health. Like reading all of her books, like she suffers from arthritis, and her arthritis gets increasingly bad. And arthritis is agitated by acidic habits like drinking coffee and alcohol and smoking cigarettes. Those things increase the acidity and increase the inflammation in the body, which in turn amp up the arthritic self. Seth does talk about how it is a genetic thing that she inherited from her feminine lineage, and it was in her life for a reason. And she had to find ways to interact with that pain, interact with that arthritis to make her life creative in a sense. And I'm not saying that's what ended up taking her out, but her lifestyle in general kind of took her out. And Robert's mourning, just kind of a demonstration of his love for her. And any type of mourning that we have, Bashar says very succinctly, is we're not really mourning the person that has passed away. We're mourning that we cannot be with them in the present. Or we're sort of mourning that we're not able to, yeah. So Robert was crying because obviously he loved Jane, but it was trippy. I feel for Robert in the last legs of his life. But knowing everything that he had experienced, went through Jane and through the Seth series, yeah, his physical, analytical mind understood what was happening, but living a physical life where you have emotions and you have limited lifespan, he was just having a human moment, experiencing what it meant to be human. Right? Because if things last forever, they're not valuable. It's that limited thing that gives them that. Yeah, so the mourning is a very beautiful way of expressing the briefness of that person's life, of the briefness of her life and her work.
Which is your favorite book? Is it The Dreams?
I do love that book a lot, but I would have to say, oh my God, I'm not going to turn to my bookshelf because it's behind my sheet. I'm just going to pick up, it's got a funky title, and it's a 2-part Seth series.
Do you have all of
The
these in
Unknown
physical
Reality.
copies? The Unknown Reality.
I did, but I've lent some out, and I had to leave some behind when I was moving, so I don't have all of them anymore, but I did own all the physical books at one point. The Unknown Reality, Volume 1 and Volume 2. That is, it goes really deep into the non-physical, non-conscious parts. It's very fascinating. A lot of it's abstract. And then another really good one is the Oversoul 7 trilogy.
And that's actually by Jane, right?
Yeah, that's by Jane. And it's written to present itself as, it's got the concepts of the Seth series embedded, but it's not it's not the typical book of a dialogue between Robert, Jane, and Seth. Instead, it's written from the perspective of an entity called Oversoul 7. So it's like a fictional book written as a fictional story. It's written from the perspective of this being called Oversoul 7, and Oversoul is a soul, as a pupil that is engaging with a higher entity that's also managing different incarnations that it pops in and out of. So it's kind of written from the perspective of the Oversoul. It's kind of cool. You get to kind of see through Jane's writing the thoughts and the feelings and the processes that the soul goes through in managing different incarnations at the same time.
Wow.
Yeah, so you can see how it pops in and out of all these incarnations and what it gleans off of it, and then how it develops and evolves over time. So
Wow.
yeah, if there's ever an audiobook of it, check it out. If you ever have the time to sit down and read a book, because obviously there's a lot of books. Like I'm looking at this list of books, and there is, let's see, there's 25 different books. Yeah, there's a lot of material. Not all of it is pure pure Seth material. Some of it is spin-offs of Jane and Robert's personal work that integrate maybe Seth's philosophy. But yeah,
Mm.
there's at least 20 books. But they're all fascinating.
So much to learn, so much to discover, so much that
Yeah.
just lives beneath the surface each and every day, all the time.
Yeah, it's easy to get lost in the complexity, but it's like that breath of the in and out, right? You breathe into the complexity, then you exhale into the simplicity, and finding that link in between, the space in between, and seeing how it all does connect. It's fun to expand.
Wow.
Yeah, for our listeners out there, there is something magical about how this reality works. And if you are willing to do the searching, willing to do your own scientific method testing, putting yourself out there, you can establish some system that works. You can use the analytical and your feeling part, the heart, to interact with the reality, to validate what you think it could be. It's fascinating. It gets more and more fascinating and exciting the more you dive into it.
Hmm.
That's just me and my own motivation. Maybe everyone's gonna have their own motivations, but yeah, it's my own personal evolution has been believing in the magic and then not believing in the magic and then for sure believing in magic like 100% now. Something mysterious, something bizarre that we can't explain.
Isn't that fun?
It's a lot of,
Every,
yeah.
everything's magic. Everything. How do we have a heart beating? How do animals fly in synchronicity? Or birds? How do birds fly in synchronicity? You know, how,
Yeah,
how do dolphins? How can they communicate so far away? How can a shark smell blood miles away? Sense
yeah.
blood. Like,
One of my best friends who's very scientific minded, very analytical, he truly believes, like he refuses to believe in magic. It's all very black and white to him. And I have to understand and respect that that's a valid view. That
mm,
the earth and all of its mystery and all this crazy life and how earth is in this perfect Goldilocks zone could have been just some insane accident as big as this universe is. And then consciousness just suddenly appears. Yeah, maybe. But I think if you keep digging, you'll see that it's fucking impossible if this was an accident. There's just no way. Mathematically, it's an insane statistic. But yeah, teach their own.
yeah, but statistics are interpretations of whatever equation, whatever it is, whatever you want the data to show. You can find it. Seek and ye shall find. You know, this is our law of attraction. Being people that are literally present in space time right now, or time space, however you want to define it. I'm here, you know, in the stars and looking down at Earth. You're there in the center of a galaxy. And what is this? Your background.
I have no clue. It's a galaxy, but the object that's in it, it looks like a super elongated star tetrahedron. I don't know, but it looks cool.
It
That's the only
does.
reason why I picked it.
Yes. Oh man. Well, brother, this has been a great chat. Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Thank
it's been
you.
interesting. A bit more impromptu, but yeah, a great discussion. A discussion about new beginnings, discussion about how the future is constituted a bit by our past and how we decide to interpret that. What kind of energy dynamics from your absorption of your childhood are you going to
Mm.
integrate or push out or yeah, how you raise your child. It's going to be a fun adventure, but with how conscious you are, I'm excited for the child.
Ah, thanks, man.
Yeah,
Me
dude.
too.
Yeah, magic continues. I
Yes,
mean, that by itself, a new life, like life is still miraculous. How complex consciousness comes from two cells, a sperm and an egg, zygote. That's magic.
it is. Wow.
Hell
All
yeah,
right,
dude.
brother. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate this. It's been tremendous. And I look forward to the next journey next Tuesday.
I'm excited to see you in person, give you a hug, and do this next episode in person.
Yes, bro. That sounds great. Awesome.
Have a
Thank
good
you
rest of
so
your
much,
night.
Lee. You too, man. Take care,
Take it
brother.
easy.